Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. Our program is brought to you from the Valley Access Studios out of Stillwater. Now here we are, a month has gone by, and it's time for the all-around grant update with Councilmember Loren Sederstrom. Thank you, Mr. Sederstrom, for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to be able to come and update and continue to inform the citizens of things that are happening in Grant. Because a lot of information doesn't get out and a lot of things are going on. So we're going to start again where we're bogged down with the agenda items, getting things on the agenda. They've changed the rule multiple times. In most cities, as you can testify, that anybody can put anything on the agenda to discuss it. Now, we just had the big hydrovac thing that we've talked about, and I've attempted to get it on the agenda 3 times to update the ordinance because, in fact, hydrovac discharge is a form of liquid waste. Now, they changed the rules. So they're saying, well, you have to bring it to discussion at the end of the meeting. You have to have a motion to discuss it. You have to have a second. Then you can explain your idea. Then it has to be voted on by the majority to get it on the agenda for the next month. So that's what we're going to slide into right away, an ongoing discussion on talking about, it's number 598 on about the agenda.
This kind of belligerence continues, we're going to adjourn the meeting.
I'm close.
And whatever our views are, whatever things we wish to accomplish, it ain't going to happen in an adjourned meeting. So I hope I can convey to everybody here that if there's something you want to accomplish, if there's something that you want to do, you do it in an orderly way. In just a second, we're not leaping out of the bushes at anybody here. That's the end of the flurry of back and forth for purposes of tonight's meeting. Let's just be gentlemen about it and move on.
I have a question.
I believe Larry was first. He had his arm up.
All right. I did have items to be removed from the consent agenda. I want the citizens of Grant to understand.
We're not going to do
city
that.
council
Lauren, we're going to go right
are
to you,
not,
please.
Are not correct.
Lauren.
I did not realize it's a race to put stuff on or have items pulled from the consent agenda. This is why the League of Minnesota Cities is getting involved.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess.
5-minute recess. Why? Go ahead and shut that off. 5-minute recess, please. Thank you very much.
Well, they took a recess. I don't know if you've noticed, but this attorney is worse than the last one. He's turned to the other side. He's basically enabling the council majority to not let us participate. You know, it's the voice of the majority. I mean, it's the will of the majority, but it's the voice of the minority. You always should have, if there are views other than one, you should be able, at least if you have a contrary view, put it out. There's 2 sides to every issue, but what they're essentially trying to do is not allow discussion. And one of the things they put on the consent agenda are new rules of participation. So in other words, we can't even discuss it. And I asked the attorney before the meeting started, did you write these rules? He said, I certainly did. So basically what they're trying to maneuver and do is let the 3 council majority members run the city without any input or even discussion at all about what the minority says. And again, we gave the example with the hydrovac. I brought it up 3 times and had it completely written out, and they wouldn't put it on the agenda. They won't discuss it. They just sweep it under the rug.
And Councilmember Sederstrom, this is very troubling to me because a consent agenda is reserved for those items that are routine in nature and not in dispute. So for instance, the monthly
Phone bill.
You're going to approve it anyway because it's part of what the city does. That's part of the budget, it's part of the day-to-day. But we talked about on a previous program that certainly land use changes or variances or anything having to do with land development, that's something that should not be on a consent agenda. A CUP, a planned unit development approval, any of that kind of stuff, that should not be on a consent agenda because it is not routine in nature.
Well, correct me if I'm...
Establishing the rules of policies of conduct of the council, while that could be routine in nature, it certainly is worthy of discussion by the council members themselves, especially if somebody else wrote it and is putting those policies and procedures onto the council. Because you told me that the attorney wrote this policy, wrote these rules. And if he wrote them, that means then that they are being enacted by the majority, something that was written by a third person to control the council. And that is bothersome because the council is a body that is entitled to create their own rules, that they can talk about their own rules of conduct. And while the minority vote may be voted down, at least they had an opportunity to object or contest or to say they agree with something. But this eliminates all of that, especially since in your city, you're not allowed to take anything off the consent agenda for discussion, which is normal in all other communities that I'm aware of.
Well, you've had a lot of experience in government, and normally policy decisions require some form of discussion. You're supposed to be discussing the policies to understand the ramifications, the limitations, etc. And that's what you do. Putting things on the consent agenda, not to allow it to be discussed, most people don't even know what's in the documents that they put in the consent agenda. They do appointment lists. They do all types of things with the consent agenda. So again, what they're trying to do is eliminate transparency in government. This is going to come up at the end of the show too. We'll talk about some transparency issues. But the other thing I want to point out, unless you have something to add, remember in this last clip we just had, I said, may I talk? You know, and I was given the floor to say something. Now, we're going to play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side and you'll see what happened. Said that I would have a turn.
We've kind of gone past that. Is it relevant to 5, the city engineer, Brad Reestack? You went outside, we took a 5-minute recess. I'm pretty much done with that. We're moving forward.
Well, we're going to talk about the commentary policy.
Yeah, you can talk about the commentary policy when it comes up, and I'm sure the attorney will have some things to say about that.
Camp,
But
it's
for
not on a
now,
consent agenda, there'll be no discussion.
for now,
Just a second.
yes, please.
I'm gonna interrupt.
Yep.
Now we have the attorney saying, well, let me interrupt. Okay, was he called on? Is he now a sitting council member?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, it was interesting. What I wanted to point out is I raised my hand, was recognized, and said, okay, you can talk. Well, we come back and sit down after a 5-minute recess. I'm not allowed to talk. This happens continually where I'm allowed not to give my opinion or have any discussion. Most of the time I sit there. If I do get called on, it's rare. If I do get called on, after about less than 60 seconds, I'm interrupted and shut down. No matter how important it is. A couple of months ago, I was going over the chart of waste, you know, the rules, and he talked over the top of me when I was only a quarter of the way down and distorted things. But
And you know, one thing I want to bring up, Mr. Sederstrom, that is another issue that is very disturbing to me, having been a former elected official, and that I understand some of the internal workings of the dynamics of what goes on in the back room. Oftentimes, in order to control an elected official, because maybe they are a vocal minority or because they represent a segment of the residents of the community that people don't want to hear from, that there is this underlying desire to silence those elected officials. And one of the best ways to silence those elected officials is to have a subtle way of blackmailing them so that they will keep their mouth shut because they're concerned and worried that somebody is then going to say something bad about them in public. Now, I've seen this happen to past elected officials in Maplewood. I know that this technique was tried on me as the mayor of Maplewood, and it's a very subtle way because they get you in the back room. In your case, during recess. During Larry Lanou's case, during recess. And we're not going to go into all the details of what was being said to the two of you
But we were
in
both
recess.
threatened. We were both threatened. And I saw after the fact, when we came back from the recess, the attorney went and talked to the police officer.
Right.
So
So they were doing a setup, and that to me is very concerning. And so we won't go on into these details too much, but I do want to let our viewers know that they were attempting the setup of a blackmail, a political blackmail, during that recess at this meeting, and that you didn't take the bait and you rose above it, and they didn't get you. But it's only because you were astute enough to recognize that that was the plan that was being laid. And I think it's important for our viewers to realize that those kinds of things go on in the back room, and it is very disappointing to see that this attorney so early on in his tenure as the new city attorney is taking those kinds of actions. It's disturbing. But we have more clips, so let's continue.
Okay, let's go to the next clip. This is about clarifying questions, and we'll talk on the other side.
Opening statement for clarification is the one I first made to Attorney Dave Snyder. What form of city are we? I know we're a statutory plan. I do not know what plan we operate under, because that makes a difference on how city council meetings are run. He had stated he'd provide me with that information. To this point, our city attorney has not provided that information to us, so it all has a bearing on how your city is run. And our city attorney has refused to provide that information.
Yep.
Let me just say this, Mr. Mayor. if
And then
I
we're
may
done with
Make
the
a
clarifying
statement.
point.
What are we?
Then we're done.
I feel safe in saying this much. Whatever form of organization the city has, it doesn't include interruptions and outbursts at council meetings. You know, that's not a statutory right. And so the mayor has to recognize anybody that's going to be speaking here, and he doesn't, that is to say, he doesn't have to recognize speakers if this is going to get redundant or not germane. I'm happy to answer any legitimate questions. With that, we turn it back over
That
to
was
the
a
mayor.
legitimate
Go from there.
question,
And you turn it
failed
back
to answer.
over to the,
Now, you see how he answered, but he didn't answer. This guy is worse than the one we had. He's very diabolical. They're tightening the noose, so to speak. So what he's going to do if we speak out of turn, he's going to try to have the police remove us. As I can see where this is going. Now, I've already been down this road once before, talked to the old Washington County Sheriff. I guess I have to make another trip and talk to, I believe his name is Dan Starry, the new Washington County Sheriff, to explain that police officers cannot remove a council member at the mayor's will. Am I correct?
Well, I think it certainly would be an improper use of authority.
Now we're going forward with some of the agenda. One of the things they're doing is approving a 300-acre development, of which about 150 acres is going to be left wide open, and they're meandering it through. So it's called the White Oaks. And why don't we play this clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Done a great job preparing a development. I think they can be used as an example for the city, and at this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2018-6, approving the final plat for White Oak Savannah.
Second.
okay, thank you, gentlemen. For discussion, Tom was first and then Denny.
Now, I noticed in this particular instance, there's a motion on the table, and discussion is allowed. Now, we have shown in other clips, in other programs, where there is a motion, there is a second, and they go straight on to the vote, no discussion to be had. So what's new about this?
That's because Tom Carr on the majority is the one that wants to discuss things. And it's really interesting. These two realtors try to impress everybody with how knowledgeable they are by asking obscure questions about the development. it's really interesting. They're sitting up there puffing their chest. This is an area that they have some expertise, and they want to show everyone how intelligent they are. And what about this? And what about this? Now, obviously, the planner has went through this with a fine-tooth comb, and so has the attorney. But they're doing about a lot of what ifs and if come maybes, and gee, if the star comes out of the sky and crashes over there, will it still be a good agreement? So if they would have read the packet, they would have had all their questions answered. But they do very little work. You know, like the example of the grading permit, they told the specialist to go do it, and they had said, well, we don't want any manifests. In other words, where materials come from. Guess what's in the new grading permit? And we went over that in another show. It says origination of the materials hauled in. Well, that means that's still a manifest list. Basically, it's telling where the material.
And of course, that's a best practice as well. So I mean, this is certainly something that you were supporting and that
working hard to get.
That's right.
This new grading permit was adopted, and it was never brought for a vote. It just automatically appeared as the new official document. It was never discussed at the city council again. It was never reviewed. I don't even know if these guys know what's on it.
Or maybe the administrator was concerned that the majority might vote it down because it was good policy that you promoted.
Yeah, probably. So I'm not complaining. We got what we needed. Okay, the next clip is just a very short one, and it shows that we are team players.
To approve 2018-06, the resolution for the final plat for White Oak Savannah. All those in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed. Congratulations, gentlemen. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thanks. Thank you very much. We look forward to some new
Gonna be-
homeowners.
That went through very easily. Okay, now the next, we had 2 real estate divisions on this one. The other one is a Cossack property. It's, let me give you the background, okay? We have the 10-acre lot minimums in Grant. Okay, you can plot 5 acres. So if you have 6 5-acre lots, you're going to have one 35 or 40-acre lot to make up so it balances, okay? So that's what this man has. He has a 60-acre lot, and he's buying a house for his son that's on 5 acres, but the son can't build a big pole barn for his toys. So the dad is having, it's a lot realignment. It isn't a subdivision like the planner put forward. So what they're doing is shaving 15 acres off the 60-acre lot and adding it to the 5-acre lot so that the son can have 20 acres and he can build a 40 by 80 pole building or whatever size they want to build so he can keep his, cars, boats, trucks, tractors, toys, whatever he has in there. And, but the interesting thing is, Mayor Carr, as a real estate agent, was after another house, and he kept going, making offers to this little old lady that had a house in 10 acres. And he was the realtor for Cossack who was trying to purchase it from this little old lady, and they kept giving her offers, and they said, hey, you can even live in it for a year, no charge. And they kept upping the ante, but she refused to sell because it was obviously like $360,000, and it's a $500,000 place. And, so that's what we're talking about, because he was a real estate agent involved in this, we were asking him to recuse himself. So this is what the clip is about. Please play the next clip.
Being looked at as a minor subdivision, I kind of view it as a lot line adjustment. We're not creating any new parcels, property identification numbers, right? And so I look at more as a lot line adjustment, and I don't know if it has to go through the entire planning and zoning and everything, same as a full subdivision. I do believe it should be reviewed, and it can be done by staff, and I'm sure you did a great job doing that. At this time, though, I would ask that Mayor Tom Carr recuse himself from voting on this issue, as he has represented Mr. Cossack just recently and trying to purchase the other lot right next to it within the last year or so. So as a real estate agent representing Mr. Cossack, because it appeared that this driveway coming in off Greenlee over there, had that property been purchased successfully, it would have allowed for that driveway to go through and give them that out access back onto Indian Wells Trail. So because
Okay,
of
well,
Mr.
I'm gonna
Carr's
yep,
relationship
I'm gonna
with
stop you
Mr.
there.
Cossack,
I
would ask that
understand.
he recuse himself from voting on this issue.
Mr. Lanu, thank you very much, but the question, when anyone needs to recuse themselves on things, is not quite as complicated or diverse as that. Mr. Schneider, do you want to just very quickly run down the circumstances where someone would need to recuse themselves? Because I can't see Mr. Carr deriving any benefit from this vote.
He represented him.
Go ahead, Larry. It's not your
So
turn.
the decision about recusal is made by the individual council member who'd be the subject of consideration of recusal. It's not made by the council as a whole. So that said, it requires a showing of a direct financial interest, interest in the outcome of the specific issue before the council at that time. And we're happy to answer, questions, hypothetical or otherwise, about that, but generally speaking, the council is well aware of these standards and comports itself in compliance with them at all times.
Did you notice that the attorney didn't jump on Huber for interrupting Larry? And which is a modus operandi. You get half of what you say out there, and then he cuts you off. Oh, we're going on to this, or I won't allow that motion, or whatever it is. Basically, they're doing everything they can to stifle what's happening. And it's obvious which way the attorney's leading.
I did notice that issue with the interruptions. It seems like the rules are not consistently enforced. And one would expect that if you're going to have a rule, that it would be enforced consistently for all members of the council, not just some members of the council.
The next clip, it's where the attorney's clarifying something again, and we're going to go from there.
You may not. That's the city attorney's job to take that one, and it doesn't look like he has any action items, Larry, so I don't understand why you would need
It's not
clarification.
an action that needs voting on, it's simply a clarification.
Pardon me.
If you have a clarification for the attorney, I'd give you my leave to ask him a question.
Okay, Mr. Snyder, can you tell me the form of government our city operates under? I know we are a statutory city. What plan are we operating from?
And I would like this put, I'm gonna interrupt right now, Dave. I want this put to bed right here, right now, because if I hear it again, we're gonna either adjourn or I'm gonna start banging the hammer. I don't wanna hear it again. I want to put to bed. Mr. Lanu is currently, if I'm understanding correctly, involved in some type of litigation regarding this question, and I don't want it brought forward again, and I'll leave my comments there.
And I think you're right, Mr. Mayor, there is this litigation that somehow relates to this question. I feel safe in saying that, I feel safe in saying that we're the civil and non-interrupting kind of city. And that's the thing that we're gonna be focused on going forward. And academic inquiries about whether it's Plan A, Plan B, weak mayor, strong mayor, are all secondary to the principal thing that we're up here to do a job. We can't do it if we're stepping on each other and interrupting and everything else. So that's the end of my remarks, and that's the only remarks I'll ever have on that subject again.
Excellent.
No matter who asks me.
Thank you very much. Moving on to
Now, that is the best non-answer lawyer answer I have heard for a really long time. We are the civil type of city. Okay, well, it is a very simple question as to how is your community, how is your city organized under state statute. Are you a charter city? We can answer no in your case.
Not a charter.
Are you a Plan B city? The answer is no. You do not have a city manager. There's only 16 Plan B cities in the state of Minnesota, Maplewood, Roseville being a couple of those. But the city of Grant is not on that list. And actually, it's the League of Minnesota Cities that can give you a list of the number of Plan B cities that there are in the state. So that leaves you with being a Plan A city, and whether or not if you have a strong mayor system, or whether or not if you all council members are on the same footing.
where all the council members are on the same footing, we're the weak mayor system. Unless you have a mayor that's grabbing the power and has an attorney to back him up, that's stifling the minority.
But it isn't a state, but that is not based on a state statute.
That's right.
That's based on personal inclination.
Well, the other interesting thing that I wanted, as long as we're talking about the attorney and we've talked a bit, can we pull up that logo on the letterhead that the man had when he applied for the position? What we're looking at is a logo for the city of Grant, a home in the country. Now, what's very interesting, he put this logo on his RFP, request for proposal, for him to be the city attorney. Well, what is double interesting, Jack Smith was on the Charter Commission, and he put this logo on literature he sent out to support getting the charter, and they went to the Office of Administrative Hearing and sued him. They then appealed it, and they won out, saying that he couldn't use that.
I want to clarify for our viewers, though, is that he wasn't doing it personally as an individual. He was doing it in relation to the Charter Commission, correct?
Yep, the committee for the charter.
Right, and see, and that's a distinction, because, and I don't want that to be lost on our viewers, because Jack Smith wasn't doing this as an individual. He wasn't doing it as a company. He was actually doing it as part of the endeavors of the Charter Commission, who was investigating and looking into and putting together a charter for the city of Grant to become a charter city.
And so now this guy's using it, and it's no big deal.
Right, so the point you're making is that it was a big deal, so much a big deal, that the city of Grant sued one of the members of the Charter Commission when the Charter Commission was using the logo. We see here that there is a logo not only on one of the front pages, but then here they've got a page where they have pictures of all of the attorneys that are there to serve the city of Grant's needs as city attorney, and right smack dab in the middle of it, they've got the logo of the city of Grant. Is the city of Grant proposing to sue the law firm that they then hired?
Well, not only that, we never vote on a lawsuit who we're going after. It's never discussed. It just happens. It's kind of like the Wild West. He's not the sheriff riding into town, it's the attorney, and he decides who's they're going to go after.
And you'll notice that when we show the next few clips, that there is a poster in front of the council table, and that also has that logo of the city of Grant. So you'll notice that the city of Grant certainly uses it as their logo. They've sued people on what they claim is the inappropriate use of their logo, and yet they look the other way when a business used the logo in trying to promote their legal services to the city.
Which is a commercial use of the logo.
It is.
Okay, we're going on to the next one. It's called the CERT team, Certified Emergency Response Team. That's what CERT means. And if we could play 605, please.
And for use of town hall to organize a CERT team, which is a Certified Emergency Response Team. I was working with deputy, and maybe not even a deputy, but Douglas Berglund, who's in charge of that. I'm not sure that's actually his position. But that's what he was in charge of, and I tried to organize that, and our city refused it. So right now, our city has absolutely no emergency response team. We have no program in place, so I think it's important that we are left solely at the, I wouldn't say the mercy, but we're left, if we're to say triage, if a storm comes, it typically comes from the west, traveling to the east, so they are going to, of course, go to the first location where the most people are, which is probably going to be Willerny, Matamidi. We're a rural community, 10-acre density. So I felt it was important to organize a CERT team. I think we lost the support of the citizens when our city refused access to the building and allowed them to organize. So I think it's important that we do work with Washington County to get this done because they are our only provider for help.
Okay.
This is a good initiative, that you should have something like this in place. I mean, a few years back, you know, a tornado hit Hugo. Hugo had an emergency plan in place. You never know when something like a tornado could occur.
Well, a tornado has hit Grant. It hit west of on Manning in 96, just south of there. It took a couple barns down. It took a couple houses. So there was some damage there. We have had this experience before. But once again, Diana, because this is my idea or Larry's idea, they will not participate at all. Just like, for example, like last summer with the flooding. We wanted to have an emergency meeting to help these people, and Mayor Huber said, oh, well, we'll put it off for another 60 days or another 30 days. Well, when your house is being flooded, that's what you want to hear? Well, we'll deal with it in 30 days and see if you're still your head's still above water.
We'll see if you haven't floated away yet.
But again, you know, these people don't run the city. The mayor doesn't run the city. Again and again, it's the professionals that are deciding what's done. They puff their chests and make a big deal about road issues. And it's going to be interesting when they talk about road issues because they have special projects. Well, and they're going to have another special project. And guess what? It's the road in front of the mayor and the assistant mayor's house. And if it's a special road project, the citizens don't pay for it. So that's what they're attempting to do this year. Otherwise, they assess everybody along the road. But they're just going to do a third of the road or up past their place as a special project, so they're not assessed. Imagine that. Now, they just did one this year, last year down on 65th, and all the people have to kick in $16,000 or $20,000, and that's going to be done this summer. Well, they're paying for it. Well, but if it's a special project, quote unquote, it's a free ride, and they're going to benefit, and that's what it's going by. It's just very interesting. So we don't have the CERT team. We just got the air raid sirens in, and Larry Lanou was the one that got that going. He coordinated with Washington County and got the first one in, and these clowns were looking on Craigslist for used 220 volt sirens. Well, we don't have any of that. Or 330. We don't have any of that triple project or power except one or two places in the city. So finally, after pushing around, they finally got the first one. But then they had to keep going and get two more. But it's just been very interesting. It's kind of a do nothing, hands off. Let the professionals run the city. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's up, what's down.
So let me get this right. So with this proposal to establish a CERT team, the voting majority said no.
Nope, we can't use the city hall. We can't do this.
Wow.
And they can use the church. Well, excuse me, the church, which is the church I go to. Why should the church be doing all these types of things when it's very busy anyway and quite actively used? We should be able to use the town hall.
And having and establishing a CERT team and the procedures for emergency response, that is a city function. That is something totally related to public safety of your community. And so to say that the team cannot use City Hall is preposterous.
Well, we don't have a public works department either that has heavy equipment. So who's going to bring a front end loader in and lift logs off the road or chainsaws to cut them up?
Yeah.
So what we have to do, there's a bunch of contractors that are private citizens. I mean, I'd certainly bring one of my tractors out in a loader to help do some things, but we have to coordinate it and get people together and have a calling list. But that's what they don't want to do. But let's go on. We renewed the contract for the assessor. But Dan Potter, about 6 years ago, requested that we take RFPs, and we got a new assessor, and he's worked out very well. Now, Huber kept saying he's part of the minority in the city council. Well, he's never been in the minority. He's always been in the majority. It was Carr, Huber, and oh, I forget the other guy's name that left, but he's never been in the minority, and at the time he fought this tooth and nail, but now look what he says about this assessor now. If we could play the next clip, it's very short.
Remember Dan Potter, I know you're out there, Dan Potter. Thank you, Todd Smith was a good move, you were right. So I just have to say that to Dan Potter, because that was his recommendation, and he did a good job there.
They didn't have the motion, a second, and a majority vote when Dan was on there. That was brought about when Larry and I, it was brought on before we were sworn into office. So they changed all the procedures in December of 14. So in January of 15, when we were sworn in, we had all these new procedures. Not only that, within 5 minutes of Larry being sworn in, they told them they were going to censor him, which in fact they did, and they ended up going to court, and in fact it was an illegal censure. But we're going to go on from there. We're going to be talking more things about agenda items again in 607, so if we could play that, please.
As you well know, the agenda items are action items. So Councilmember Lanoux, whatever you wanted to add to this agenda, feel free to bring up under your city council reports.
Yeah, and future agenda items, and let me speak to what you just said there about bringing up the same thing incessantly, over and over and over. It's, if you cannot get a majority of this council to understand and be persuasive enough with evidence and good rhetoric to convince the majority to do that, because I'm always willing to listen to good reason, speaking for myself, then I am not willing to hear these over and over and over. And I won't even call the vote if they keep coming over and over and over. And I think if empowered to do so, I would call them out of order or ask the council to promulgate some sort of rule where we don't have to hear the exact same thing every last meeting, because it's a waste of all of our time. So that being said, I'm going to leave that comment there. Larry, you've had.
What I heard clearly was that if you have the evidence, if you have the persuasive rhetoric, then the Mayor Huber, is willing to listen. And then in the next breath he says, I'm not going to listen to it anymore. And if I were in the minority and I wanted to present the item again, I would simply say that based upon the policy of having evidence and persuasive rhetoric, that I now have new evidence, additional new evidence, and that I've been working on my rhetoric and attempting to become more persuasive. So now that I have more rhetoric, persuasive rhetoric, I would like to attempt to put it on the agenda again because I have new evidence and I've been working on my speech.
Well, I put on 3 occasions, and I actually wrote the ordinance adoption, in other words, the amendment to adopt the ordinance for the hydrovac. They wouldn't listen to that. I brought the evidence there of saying this is liquid waste. I brought the chart up that deals with waste products and grant. I got cut off at the knees. I then brought it back 3 times, and they say, oh, we can't do that. It's above our pay grade, and we don't have that, and it's not. The state has to do that, and every excuse under the sun not to regulate waste, liquid waste that was being brought into Grant and dumped in a specific area. It's one thing to dump 1 truck, I understand that. But when you're dumping 400 trucks, and 6 of them came in from 3M on a Saturday night, which is at 8:30, which is not even within the allowable hours of operation, and you turned a blind eye to this is absolutely ridiculous. It begs the question, was somebody getting some money under the table? But other than that...
And and with all the evidence that you presented and your persuasive rhetoric and how the importance of looking at this issue for the residents and for the groundwater of the community, short of all that, really the only thing that you could have done more was to actually have somebody from one of the state agency come and present them as part of your evidence and have them be a witness to testify as to the fact that cities do have the ability, through the act of creating ordinances, have the ability to regulate.
Well, that doesn't work either, Diana, because Paul Rogaszewski, a prominent attorney, was a member of the Charter Commission. and he came there to speak, and they wouldn't allow him to speak. They many times do not allow someone to speak. Fran Myron, the county commissioner, was there, and he wasn't allowed to speak. So again, it's a very narrow focus. And now we're going to go to the next one. We're talking about this limiting agenda again. This is the former mayor, Deputy Mayor Carr, with his arrogant little speech. So why don't we'll talk on the other side.
Whole council, but right now, I mean, I've talked about this at the beginning of the meeting, it's happened every time. Kim, currently, we don't really have any thing in our rules, our code, our little booklet on how to run a meeting. What we do, our procedure book. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On agenda items, and we have some things on the agenda, how to set them up, right? What you're supposed to do, is that all documented? I haven't looked, okay.
Yes.
It is.
Do we have anything in there that says if you don't, it's not on the agenda? If you don't get this done, you don't follow that procedure?
I will have to
Okay,
check.
okay, I would like to make a change to our procedure book. I would also suggest that just before where we have our regular agenda and consent agenda, as sad as this may seem to do, because I think it's totally unnecessary, that we put that something on there, consent agenda and the regular agenda are pretty much set. I came in today and we had a change with a variance that got pulled. I had a new agenda sitting here. That is fine. We're a small community. Hours before the meeting, we can change our agenda. There's no need to go through this adding and not adding things to the consent or regular agenda. If it doesn't get on, it doesn't get on. I would just assume, pass those, move on to the agenda. We have a discussion item, what we're talking about right now. That's a topic we can bring up. But I would like to make it clear to Mr. Lanou or anybody else on this council that wants to bring something up, what the procedure is, and that when we get here and we're unprepared and you're trying to add stuff that's, let's call it bad form.
Yeah.
And if, you know, and obviously emergency is an emergency, I get that. But I really, I tire of this, and I would like to see what the council would like to do with this.
Well,
I would say that if he's tired of listening to council members talking about community issues that are important, that he should resign. And that the position should be up for election for somebody who is not tired of serving the public.
Well, you heard him say, well, an emergency is an emergency. Well, what in the world do you think dumping 400 hydrovac trucks, a commercial operation without a conditional use permit in private land is, if that isn't an emergency?
Well, especially since you don't know what was in that waste, and if that was certainly something that could harm the groundwater, that could be an emergency. That could be a chemical spill.
Well, and the whole city of Grant is on private wells. There's 25 wells within a distance of this, and they're dumping things from 3M. Of course, we know what 3M did to 2/3 of South Washington County. They polluted the groundwater. There's an $850 million suit. This 3M thing is going to come up a little bit later, too. You'll find that very interesting.
Now, I want to get back to this one last clip that we watched and understand where in the meeting is this discussion? Is this under the council discussion where they...
Yes.
Okay, and so he's putting something on the agenda about not being able to put something on the agenda. So he's doing exactly what it is that he's saying that he wants to institute, that nobody can put something on the agenda.
That's basically it.
I see.
We're going to go to the next one, 609 if we could, please, and we'll talk on the other side.
In November of 2014, Loren and I were elected to the city council. We represent the minority voice in the city council. Prior to that, our city did not have a policy and procedures manual. You wrote it from the time we were elected and before we took our seat. Look at the date when you wrote your first policy and procedures manual. It was to limit our participation, and we keep monitoring it. We change it so councilmen are no longer allowed to write in articles in the newsletter. We can't use our town hall. It's because we've been using it. So your policies and procedures manual is a bunch of bunk. It's BS. It's there to limit the council majority and the voice.
okay, let me answer that first, and then you can go on.
That says it pretty clearly, doesn't it?
Oh, pretty much. again, this concept of transparency is they don't want it. They want people to know what's going on. They don't want to know what's going on. They want to come in, sit down. Half the time they don't read their own packets till they get there. This is the blind leading the deaf, dumb, and stupid.
Well, they want to go back to the days, the olden days, when the city of Grant was a township. Because if I recall correctly, townships, they only have a board of 3. And they want to go back to the old days, and yet they want to have the protections of having been incorporated as a municipality. And so they're trying to actually have the best of both worlds. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, what the next clip that we're going to be talking about is road policy. And we've already alluded to that. Let's talk on the other side on 611.
We're sworn in, so I'm gonna say everything you said is a bunch of funk as usual. That being said, these are the items I'd like to put on for a future agenda item. And item number 1 is our road policy. I would ask that our city administrator take and copy the road policy, forward it to every council member so they can review it prior to coming to the city council meeting to discuss it. Because if I looked in the road policy, it's not very clear what our road policy is. In fact, if you look at our failing roads, you'll see we don't
You want
have
the
a
road policy. You'd like the road
I'd like
policy.
to have road
Okay.
policy put on.
Great. Let's
And
go ahead and pull
at
the
same
council.
time,
No.
I'm not finished
Well,
talking
it's-
about road
that's-
policy.
that's one
You
thing,
quit
isn't it?
interrupting me? No, you're rude.
I'm trying to clarify. If you could let me ask just one question.
Why don't you
Just going to clarify.
listen, and I will tell you what I'm trying to talk about.
Okay.
In that road
Go ahead.
policy, I would also ask that you identify our next special roads need project for the year. Right now, we have gone beyond the typical date that we would put our work out for bid to get the best competitive pricing. We failed at that. In fact, if we identified a road and a project, we'd have to go out for advertisement, probably send our engineer. We're running way behind. These are things that should have been done last probably November.
Okay. So you want to talk about that as part of the road policy,
And the
okay?
next one I'd like to talk about is the 3M settlement.
Okay, now, road policy, let's go ahead and see who wants to talk about road policy.
Which way do you think that got voted? Oh no, we have road policy, and it's all nebulous.
And what I want to know is that when Mayor Huber interrupted Larry Lanou, did the city attorney insert himself into the meeting and recommend that a recess should be had so that they could then go and talk about that in the back room?
No, it's a one-way street. It's a one-way street. If the mayor interrupts, he can do that. If Carr interrupts, they can do that. I think the clip that I missed was I told Carr to shut up. It didn't, for some reason, it didn't take. But he interrupted Larry when he was talking, and I told him to shut up, and they got a little upset. But they're talking about the special projects, and the 2 points I want to make. You get an early bid. The contractors are hungry and they give you a good price. You wait until May or June. They've got the whole year scheduled, and the only way they're going to take that bid is if there's a lot of gravy in it for them.
Yep.
So that's the problem with that. And they should be more proactive, deciding. And the other thing is special road policies I alluded to. What is the road that's very bad is a feeder road. It's called Joliet or Joliet, whichever you prefer to pronounce it. It's north of 96. It goes north for about 3/4 of a mile, and it hits into both the Woodland Acres is on the north end of it, and there's 70 homes in there, and there's also Victoria Station, which is another planned unit development. 2 of the 3 ones we have feed in off this road, so we're probably talking about 100 and some houses that we're dealing with. And this road is falling apart, and now they have that on the list to be a special project. So the people alongside the road, normally the road policy is such, if you want your road fixed, you're assessed for whatever's in front of your house. But a special road policy, it's a freebie. And the mayor and the deputy mayor both live on this, so it's going to be a free ride for them. And of course, it's not gonna go all the way to the end, but I'll tell you, it's gonna go past their house. And not only that, they're not getting done in a reasonable time. They're gonna decide in June or July and put it out for bids. And like last year, by the time they got the bids back, it was the end of August, and it was too late in the year to do it. As far as I'm concerned, what I would advocate, if it is a major feeder or thoroughfare where you have 30, 40, 50, 60 houses that use it as a main feeder, that should be taken care of by the city. And maybe a 60, 70% participation by the city, and 30, 40 by the individuals that are on it, okay? But again, I can't get that through. But he also alluded to this 3M dump situation. And it's very interesting that they will not even acknowledge that there was a 3M dump in Grant, when in fact we've provided them with a map and we've given them the Superfund site number. So play 612, and we can talk on the other side.
That's done. That's done. We have already said we are not gonna talk about it.
Next one I'd like to talk about is a 3M settlement.
Do I get a chance to speak?
When he's done, he takes more time than any other
Well,
member up
then you
here.
might as well talk about road policy. 'Cause-
Okay, that's what I would like to
No,
say.
we're done with road policy.
No,
It's
you-
already been
you-
talked
you were-
about. I'm not gonna play the game. Come on, gentlemen.
All
I'm not
I
gonna
wanna
play a
say
game.
is-
Larry, you're up, so I'm not gonna talk
Okay,
road
then-
policy.
Then evidently, Lauren, you have no
Lauren,
voice.
if you have another, Larry.
You can bring it
let
up
me
on
speak
your
with Lauren.
discussion item.
Larry, let me speak with Lauren. Lauren, if you have another item that you'd like to talk about, I'm more than happy to let you discuss that. Road policy's already been discussed. Unfortunately, Larry took the time on that one, and then we went ahead
I was gonna talk
and
about
we
the
went
special-
ahead and pulled the council, so
We're
thanks very
talking about the
much.
special projects.
Yep,
Three
thanks.
votes and it's over. Go
The
ahead.
next item I'd like to talk about is a 3M settlement. It's the Grant participation in there. Grant has a 3M dump site with a Superfund number on it.
Larry, do you have proof of that?
Yeah.
Okay, you have proof that 3M dumped in Grant. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I believe if you would.
Believe you do or you do?
I
You do or you
have,
believe?
I do have.
Okay, because the 3M settlement that I just read does not mention Grant. The MPCA has failed to identify Grant as being a part of that settlement. So I'm
They have
pretty
failed
highly
to do that.
skeptical. Larry, I'm talking. Larry, I'm talking. I'm very, very skeptical that you actually have that evidence. And in fact, if you did have that evidence, we would have already been part of that suit. But let me talk about my understanding of the 3M settlement that they just made. I'm sure some residents are very interested in this. It's an $850 million settlement with the affected cities. So Lake Elmo had a verified dump within it, Woodbury had a verified dump within it, Oakdale had a verified dump within it. At that time, 3M was dumping a industrial chemical used in many plastic products called a PFC, and I won't try to actually pronounce that, it's very long. So that got down into the water of these different communities, and 3M, after admitting its culpability here, has settled with these cities to the tune of $850 million. Now, there's an awful lot of information both online at the MPCA website and at the respective city websites where you can learn about how that money is going to be spent, how the cleanup is going to take place, how the cleanup is already taking place in Woodbury. They're pumping out, I think, 1.25 billion gallons a year out of the aquifer, cleaning it and then discharging it into the river just so it can go back through the natural cycle. So the city of Grant is not a party to it. There is no evidence we've ever been a party to it. There is no evidence, there is no solid evidence, other than conspiracy theory, that Grant ever accepted that. And as I've said before, had that been determined by the MPCA, then the MPCA would have included us in both the action and in the settlement. And I'm going to turn very quickly there before we get into your supposed evidence.
You've asked me
Dave, do you want to comment real quickly on this and discussing this in terms of the city of Grant when we have no stake in it?
Well, I can't tell what's being asked for here. If
Okay.
the request is,
Hang on a second, Larry.
can't tell what's being asked for.
Okay, Larry, go ahead and qualify again what you want to talk about.
Qualify this is pulled up from the Minnesota Superfund site website. And in it, it has Bel Air Sanitation with a Superfund number. Then it has Grant Township 3M dump site. Superfund number MND 981526429. That means it was a Grant 3M dump site. And Mr. Mayor is going to deny that this is from a Minnesota Superfund site.
Hang on.
And we should
You know,
be
to
talking
the
about
residents
where
here,
the plume is.
Enough.
Well, I guess he just wants to bang that one out.
Well, not only that, I mean, we have the documentation. We provide it consistently. Again, these guys lie.
So where did they think that the chemicals came from that were dumped at the Bel Air sanitation dump?
Well, they knew that. They really don't care. They just said it was a dump. But across the street from there actually was, in fact, a corner where people were dumping things. And it has a Superfunds number. We've provided it for the last 10 years almost, and they refuse to acknowledge it. One of the things that is going to be happening, they're having these town hall meetings. We're going to be going there. We're going to be registering this and bringing it up to the fact that that's what's happening.
And we have one last clip to end up our show. Let's take a look.
Suggested activity. Based on that, I can't make a recommendation that I should or shouldn't be doing anything in response to this. This is an example of how if there was something that was asked to be done, either by staff or somebody else, you simply say, I ask that staff do the following thing, yay or no, a nay, and the council will say yes or no in terms of whether or not they want to spend money on that resource. But I'm still sitting here, this is 10 minutes into this particular subject matter, and I don't know what's being asked. We've got an executive session we've got to get to. And again, for future council agenda item discussion, I think it's important we just concisely state what it is we're asking for and go from there. Thank you.
It was really clear that the city of Grant put on for the next agenda, the 3M settlement.
This is,
To look into the 3M Grant Township dump site was on a Superfund site to establish what was dumped and where the plume is from the material that was put there.
this is,
The Minnesota Superfund site. Do you want to deny this?
can I poll the council?
Well, that does sound pretty clear, that that Larry is trying to get it established what was dumped there. And certainly there must be that data someplace that can be determined.
We'll see. It's because it's our ID, it's not going to come up. But what is going to be happening, they have 2 more town hall meetings. We will be bringing this to the attention, and we'll go from there. But we can update you next month and let you know what's happening in all around Grant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sederstrom, and thank you for viewing our program this week. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
This is the dump site that was disturbed. As you can see, the slurry that was dumped this morning, and today's date is October 5th. Anyhow, it's this is Thursday of October. And you can see the slurry that was dumped this morning after the cease and desist letter was ordered. As you scan the area out here in this video, you can see the berms in the background. You can see the high lines. I'm going to pan over, catch the parking lot he installed. And he gravelled the parking lot so his trucks would not get stuck in here. This was not a casual deal. You can see the pit that was dug. You can see the extensive trenching that he has put in here. Actually, you can see we have the deer running through here now, the footprints. This is not a casual household activity. This is commercial in nature. This land goes on and on. There's not a single household deal. I am bringing you further down the line. You can see the pits that have been dug here. You can see how this goes on and on for acres. In the background, you may or may not catch a glimpse of a house back there. But this is a site, probably 5-6 acres in nature, and that's been dug up. You can see the water in the background. You can see how we're possibly contaminating it. It's got a piece of equipment sitting out here. And once again, here's a picture of the slurry that was just dumped this morning. This is not, this is a commercial operation.